4. Wake up, shake your booty, wake up, shake your booty, shake your booty, wake up, shake your booty, wake up. And fly, and do the butterfly, and shake my little hips. I want you, and you, to cheer with me too. Woo! You might be good at football, you might be good at track, but when it comes to basketball, you might as well step back. Come on, step back. Step back. Woo! U G L Y U G L Y.
How you both landed this role?
What, Sweet Valley High?
Yeah.
We actually auditioned for it when we were 13 years old, and randomly, the long story short is 5 years later, we ended up getting the part. So it was like the longest casting process ever.
We didn't believe it when they're like, "You've got the part." I'm like, "Are you sure? You've been saying this for 5 years."
Wow.
On the show, the twins had very different personalities. Elizabeth was shy, Jessica was a bit more outgoing. Is it the same for the two of you?
I feel like it flip-flops, right?
Yeah. I play Jessica.
And I play Elizabeth. Yeah.
And I think growing up, I was like a little bit more like Elizabeth, and now in my adult years, I've become a little more like Jessica.
She's so sassy this
Like
one.
she's married with 3 kids.
Yeah.
I'm a single Hollywood actress, so I guess I'm more like Jessica.
Role reversal.
Exactly. And the twins on the show were famous for playing pranks. They do switches, pretending to be each other. Did you guys do that off air?
We knew where you're getting. You want to see if we played like pranks
Pranks
on
on
the
boys.
boys, right?
Well, no, now that you
I mean,
mentioned
we
that.
switched classes when we were younger. We switched classes once.
Yeah, we
but-
grew up with like 4 or 5 other sets of twins. On the same day, we all switched classes and fooled all our friends.
Yeah.
So that's probably the biggest prank we've ever done.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
You'd have to do it once.
I've always wanted to be a twin just to
course,
do
of
that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But on the show, you guys went through a roller coaster of emotions. There was, tears, fighting, making up. Is it the same for you as twin sisters?
Sometimes, like, we talk to each other, we like, Lord, this is sort of like being in a music movie. We're trying to figure out, like, is it going to be like New Edition? Is it going to be like Destiny Child? Like, which model, like, somehow we don't really want. Like, we sort of want, like, we want the, like, New Edition, and then you can spawn off and have multiple acts and come back together and still put on a great show 15 years from now. Because I hear New Edition was on a great show, like, all these years later. So we sort of joke about that. But, yeah, we have, we see each other as resources, and and we also sort of recognize that at the end of the day, the relationships matter more than the labor matters, right? And that's really hard, right? Sometimes is to think. So it's the CFC is a bunch of badass women, right? All very ambitious, highly educated, really smart, and we essentially said, like, we could take the male model, which is all about sort of big upping the next superstar dude, right? The next second coming of Jesus, right? Which is how we treat, which is sort of like our leadership model culturally, right? Or we could say that in the end, we don't think that model is particularly sustainable, and so rather than competing with each other, it's, the collective model is sort of more sustainable. So it may mean that you don't have any one superstar rising out of that group, but that what you have is a superstar product all the time, a really good product. And frankly, it's more fun that way. It actually is just more fun to be able to do it in a group of people that you respect and that you know have your back. And I think that we spend a lot of time thinking about how hip hop both has gotten this right and has not gotten this right in terms of the models of how they produce work. And I think we would say that there's a hip hop ethos behind our kind of minimalist, like 2 turntables and a mic. It's like us and a blog, and we don't have a lot of digital training, so sometimes things look a little interesting. But the content is always, pretty solid, right? I wonder kind of what kind of resources, if we're like forming a hip hop feminism, for somebody coming in to feminism today, do you think hip hop feminism is the best sort of entry point for some, for like a young woman. Could it speak to her moment in the same way that it's going to yours? Or, and if, and if not, then kind of, what is that thing in this moment that's a nice blend of the like cultural context and politicization?
I think really the way to look at that, Brittany, at least for me, is that hip hop was a viable point of entry, right? So I also understood that my feminism wouldn't always be rooted in having to talk about hip hop. And so, it's like this moment where people get really upset that Beyonce calls herself a feminist. And I'm like, it is very possible that a 14-year-old can look at Flawless, hear Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, make her way to Chicken Heads, then find her way to Bell Hooks, and find her way to Patricia Hill Collins. And that's kind of how it works. And so to me, it's like you embrace the place where people find openings and spaces, because the formulation of your feminism is ultimately going to be something very personal, right? So the work that I'm doing now around, the work that we're doing now around, so I should say that one of the most incredible experiences for me, speaking at, about the negating that sort of second coming of Jesus model, the dudes kind of do in hip hop, is I don't know if people really understand how reciprocal the relationship is and how cross-generational, I guess. Jesus, okay. I'm not quite old enough to be their mother, but I am older, significantly older. We spend a lot of time talking to each other. Some of those things are about feminism. Some of them are about things that should never, ever, ever go on record. But one of the things that has been really critical for me is how circular and how beautiful that model is. Because while I might have been their point of entry, when I entered the academy is by nature a really I don't do well in structures I'm a hip hop feminist. I believe in blowing shit up. So going into this place where I absolutely created a book that was meant not to function in that place, then to be like, okay, I'm gonna do this work and I want y'all to give me a PhD, I still had to find a model in that could work. And my model became this generation of scholars who read my work and embraced feminism, but then I turned to them this dissertation proposal, y'all, what is she really asking me for? I don't really want it, a lot of the conversations are like that, with a lot of expletives. And to kind of, have them remind me why my work matters in the context of academia, which I don't always see because I'm busy trying to blow the model up, and understand that the work is situated there for a reason. And so my work becomes enriched in a very different scholarly kind of way because of my consistent engagement with these younger scholars who may have decided hip hop was their point of entry, but their scholarship is just bad. I'm often sitting here, I tweeted as I was listening to Treva's presentation, I know people say she's me and Mark Anthony Neal's intellectual love child, but all I ever want to do is be in Treva's class. I just be sitting there why can't I take your class though? And I think that's one of the ways that a model in feminism works really well, when you understand that it's about the reciprocity. And not this kind of, because I feel like what I had to come up against in many ways was a very stringent kind of keeping of the guard, of older black female feminists who were just I don't know what this is, I don't want no parts of it, I don't like the fact that it's in my classroom. If it's gonna be in my classroom, I wanna rip it apart because there's no theory. And I basically wrote it being fuck you and your theory. That's really, I don't live theory. My feminism exists very much not in a tower but on these streets. So what does that mean? Right. Then having to come to Brittany and go, okay, so this affect theory that I said I wasn't gonna go nowhere near, that might actually work really well in chapter blah, 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 blah. So I think it does mean this understanding of a fluidity and an openness and a model that is really much more circular than linear, you know, and it's important.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, I use your book many a day to full of conversations in my classes, right? Because I think that what hip-hop feminism, hip-hop generation feminism does is give us permission to bring our whole selves to the spaces that we're in. So it becomes an invitation to say, I'm not leaving anything at the door, and I'm not going to give you the opportunity to define what this means for me, right? And so one of the things that I say to Joan, which is sort of my approach to the academy, is look, you just have to win the arguments, right? Like you just have to win the arguments. So it's not that you're wrong, it's just read all the shit they tell you, right? And then be like, here are the reasons why those arguments don't work and these arguments work better. And so, you know, for us, and that is also like this thing about, so it's so funny, right, that like the Chicken Heads book is supposed to be an academic book, because the thing is, I think that one of the things to remember is, it didn't start out for me as an academic text, but when I got to the academy, and I was in a space that didn't speak to who I was fully, then it was the book that I ran to make space for myself, right? And we hope that, so we took some of those same kinds of things we think about the CFC, is that, you know, because folks, I mean, you know, people say, oh, man, she does this, interesting. But, you know, people will say, well, this is elitist, or it's, or how do you deal with the fact that you're academics writing this kind of work? And the thing that we sort of say is, look, we haven't been academics all of our lives. Most of us are first generation. Most of the CFs are first generation academics. I'm a first generation college grad and a first generation PhD, right? And that's true for my wonder twin, Funkadelic, and some other folks in the collective as well. So we're writing for ourselves, you know, so that means that there's a way in which you're in the academy, but not of the academy, right? And you sort of have this foot in the door, but you don't ever feel like you fully fit because you're always thinking about the communities that aren't there, right? And don't have that kind of access, and how do you move among those folks too? So when we write, we're always thinking of them. If a person never gets a step foot in the college classroom, can she come to the CFC and find something that's gonna help her think about a situation that she's been going through, right? Yeah. So that, for me, that's the way we try to take up the ethos, because this thing that you said about, you know, that we don't always have to talk about hip hop. I don't know if we talk about hip hop a whole lot at the blog these days at all, right? But we talk about things in a hip hop sort of way, which is to say it's irreverent, it blows shit up, it says that all kinds of things can exist together in the same space and be productive. And those are hallmarks, I think, of the like hip hop epistemology, right? If you had to say that.
So yeah, and I wanted to just jump on that for a second and talk about the fact that, you know, when I was writing about a hip hop feminism as a, I don't know, 28, 29-year-old, and I'm now, like, I'll be 49 this year. So for me, it was also really not so much about the music all the time, it's just like how that particular group of writers that I came up with, like Jeff Chang, you know, Kevin Powell, Scott Polson Bryant, like, because we were hip hop, we just didn't ask for permission to do things. You had to just do it. You know what I mean? Like, I had never taken a journalism class, but when The Voice was like, you want to write a story? I was like, sure, I'll just figure it out. You know, this form is not really like how other journalists do their things, but to me it made sense because the writing was very informed also by the rhythm and the music, and so. Okay, then it became hip hop journalism. You know what I mean? And I think for this generation, it's not so much for me that they become hip hop feminism or even they become like crunk feminists. I want them not to ask permission to do their own intervention and their own formulation. You know, it's like I wrote, every generation of feminists is handed a bolt of cloth, and it's up to you to cut out the clothes that'll fashion it to your own liking. So, you know, I don't want people waiting around for permission to do that. You have to just do it, you know, and my model was a very hip hop one, like you don't ask, you just do it. Like, no one is gonna say, hey, can I be like one of 5 female journalists, hip hop journalists in the country? That's right. No one's gonna allow you to do that. No one gave us that space in hip hop. You had to be like, I have a right to be here. And now y'all got to get used to what that means to have a woman in the locker room. So I think that those things are still really very relevant, you know? I don't think you can ask for permission to claim Beyonce. If you want to claim Beyonce, then claim her, but understand that people are going to challenge you every step of the way. And like you say, then you have to win the argument. Then you have to figure out, all right, and then you have to be willing to also win the argument and challenge Beyonce.